You guys called me on it. Now I have to answer.
Alright. So one of you guys actually called me out on being late on the 6-month review for this Mannkitchen MK9 knife. All I'm saying is I'm the one with the really big knife here. Alright, no, I'm just joking. I'm just kidding. Look, I really appreciate it that you guys actually reminded me on doing the 6 months review. He told me, hey, you know, this was supposed to be done back in August. It's already October. Where's the 6 months follow-up? And I actually really appreciate the fact that he reminded me, and that I'm really thankful that my followers and my viewers are paying such close attention to my content. That means the world to me. I mean, as a content creator, as a person that, you know, do YouTube videos, that's the best thing we can ask for, is people that actually follow up and want to see these content. So thank you so much. That really means the world to me. Now, let's jump straight into whether or not I think the MK9 is a worthy knife. Alright, so before we get started, I have a quick question for you. Would you guys be interested in merch? Like hats, hoodies, shirts, aprons, and things like that. We're just trying to find ways to financially fund our channel, because as you guys know, we're trying to continue to improve our content. And in order for us to keep improving the content, there's certain gears that we just have to upgrade. You know, my audio gear needs upgrading, my filming gear needs upgrading. And on top of all of those expenses, there are also, I'm trying to unbox and review more knives for you guys. And all of those things cost so much money, and the cost stacks up really quickly. So I'm just trying to find ways to financially fund it. I thought about using a Patreon, but I just don't see how me creating a Patreon will deliver more value for you guys. And it would just kind of feel like a handout to me. And I'm not saying that other channels that have Patreons are taking handouts, okay? Because there are a lot of really hardworking content creators on their Patreon that delivers a ton of value on their Patreon, okay? But for me personally, I don't want to feel like I'm just taking a handout. I would rather, you know, deliver merch to you guys, so that way, you know, you guys have something physical in hand, and you guys have something, you know, monetary after you spend some, you know, spend some money with a channel, that you actually have something in return. So that's just my thought. If you guys are interested, definitely comment down below. If you guys have any thoughts, just comment down below. I would love to talk to you guys about it. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and break this down into a pros and cons list. So let's go ahead and start with the pros first. The pros, as you can see very noticeably, that this knife is freaking big. It is a very tall knife and a very long knife. For this instance, the 2.5-inch blade clearance, or the blade height, is amazing. And this is a 9-inch chef knife, comparable to your regular 8-inch, your average 8-inch chef knife, so you have an extra inch of blade length to it. The extra inch of blade length does make breaking down big items a lot easier. But it's nothing that I can't get away with using just an 8-inch chef knife. So the length of the blade is not really a selling point to me. But the 2.5 inches of blade clearance is awesome, because not only do I personally like a taller knife, this makes a very big surface here that you can double this as a food scooper. So after you get done prepping, you can scoop it all up, throw it in the pan, throw it in your mixing bowl, wherever you need your ingredients to go. It's great for scooping up whatever you just prepped. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is actually this handle. This handle is very comfortable. I think Clef nailed it on this handle. It is not overly thick, so it still keeps it fairly nimble and very easy to grip. But it also has just the right width to it to allow it to fit in your palm perfectly. So even for people with bigger hands, or even smaller hands, this is a very comfortable knife to hold in your hand. Well, as far as the handle goes, I am going to touch on the micro bolster here in a little bit. The third pro that I really like about this knife is the steel that it is made out of. This is a US made nitrogen steel. Like I said before, Spyderco uses this steel a lot. And another brand that uses this steel is also Nexus. Mannkitchen calls this the Nitro X63 steel, and this steel is awesome. It takes a great edge, and it also has a fantastic edge retention. For the past 6 months, or the past 8 months, I haven't had to sharpen this knife outside of just using your steel and your strop just here and there to keep the edge fairly sharp. that's gotta say something. Like, the edge retention is very good on this knife. Not that I use this knife on like a daily basis for 6 months, but I have used this knife fairly often in rotation with all the other knives that I am reviewing and doing 6 months review on. So this knife is in the rotation fairly often, just not my daily. Now the last pro that I want to talk about is actually the profile of the knife. I think the profile of the knife is very well designed. This convexing shape that you see, this curvature, takes a lot of fatigue out of your wrist whenever you're cutting. It puts it in a much more natural position. So it just, takes some of the fatigue off of your wrist, which is very nice, especially if you're a line cook or someone that cooks and have to cut stuff for like 8 hours a day. I mean, it builds up on you. And then the next thing I want to talk about on the profile is the flat spot and how much belly there is on the knife. The flat spot is like perfect. There's just the right amount of flat spot on the knife. Sometimes you find knives that have too much curvature or too much belly where you don't really have much of a flat spot to cut with or chop with, but this knife has just the right amount of flat spot, which I think is really nice. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and move on over to the cons list. When I say cons list, I don't want you to think that this is just like the thing that is just going to make or break this knife. When I say cons list, it just means there are several things on this knife or items on a knife that I would like to see changed personally, to fit my preferences, because every knife that you pick up is not going to be perfect, and there's just certain things that you'll want to change in a knife to make it personalized to you. And these are just the things that I would like to see changed on the knife that will make it perfect for me. Now the first thing I will want to see changed is actually this micro bolster. In the original video, I actually talked about how I think it's a great idea, and it's pretty cool that Clef designed it to be kind of like a hybrid of a bolster and no bolster knife. And as I'm using this knife more and more throughout the last 8 months, it's actually created more discomfort for me than anything else, because as you can see here, this micro bolster, there is the bolster connecting to the choil area right here are really sharp, and they're very hard edges. So whenever I pinch grip the knife, I don't know if you guys can see this, my middle finger right here digs right into it, and it is very, very uncomfortable when I'm using it. And so because of the discomfort, I've actually found myself not going for this knife several times on numerous occasions, because I just don't want to deal with that discomfort, because it was just so harsh on my hands. And one thing that I have done to kind of work around it is actually do a double finger pinch grip, which I'm using both of my fingers on the knife. I use this similar grip on a really big Chinese cleaver. I don't know if it's because the knife is so big that maybe a double finger pinch grip will be better for it. But that's one way to work around this discomfort that I feel for my middle finger. That sounded really goofy, but just the discomfort on my hand that the micro bolster have caused. So I would actually rather see that there's no bolster at all, that it's just a clean all knife and a rounded off choil. A crown choil would be fantastic. So that's the first thing that I would like to see change on the knife, personally for me. Alright, so the second con of the knife is actually the thickness behind the edge. A lot of times people only think about performance-wise, is just thinking about the geometry of the edge. What's the angle of the edge and this and that. But a lot of times you have to think about the rest of the knife. The thickness behind the edge actually affects the performance quite a bit. And most of the knives that I personally like has an edge thickness behind, or the blade thickness behind the edge, about 0.4 to 0.45 millimeters. Now, when I measured the Mannkitchen knife, this MK9 starting from the heel is about 0.7 to 0.75 millimeters, and then it gradually moves up to like 0.6. Most of the places is about 0.6, 0.65, and then gradually thins out at the very top of the knife. So it has a very nice gradual distal taper, and the grind is very smooth and gradual. So it's very nice craftsmanship. But because it is about 0.6 to 0.65, it is a noticeable thickness difference. I know it doesn't seem like much because it's just 0.2 millimeters difference, but for a knife's performance, 0.2 millimeters makes a huge difference on how it feels when it cuts. And it just doesn't cut as smooth as a knife that is, of course, thinner. And I personally prefer a knife that is about 0.4 to 0.45 millimeters behind the edge. So that's just one thing. But I'm interested to kind of see, because I haven't had to sharpen this knife yet, when I sharpen it, put an edge on it myself, or try to, take it down on a grinder and gradually just kind of thin out just a little bit of the knife behind the edge, how this knife will perform. Because outside of that and a micro bolster, this knife has a lot to offer. Alright guys, so in conclusion, there's just several things that I would like to see changed personally on this knife, just like this micro bolster, and just a little bit thinner of a blade behind the edge. But those two things aren't deal breakers for me, because I can easily round this bolster off downstairs and make it a lot more comfortable. But I will leave it up to you to decide whether or not those are deal breakers for you, because those are your preferences, and also whether or not the pros of this knife outweighs the cons. And if you like this video, if you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, it will mean the world to me. Help me support all this madness, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.